Hey, it's Garth Weber. If you're wondering about the shirt, there was a rainstorm last night and I had the terrible sense to step out onto the porch and you can see the results of that. But anyway, I'm still wearing the shirt. It's April 24th, 2021, and we are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel with this pandemic. I think it's going to take the rest of the year to get through it, but we will get through it. So wear your masks, get vaccinated if you haven't. That's my advice. And stay safe, and before too long, we can go back to some semblance of normality, I hope. So I wanted to make a video about stolen instruments. This has happened to me 4 times in my life. I've had 4 guitars stolen. And I want to explain why it's so painful for the person who owned the instrument. Guitars cannot be replaced just with money. Every guitar is different. You could take 2 guitars off the assembly line, one after another, and they're going to sound different, they're going to feel different. Not as much as it did in the, before robots were building the guitars, because when humans build them, there's going to be variation. But you still have to realize that you're getting a piece of wood, and maybe it's a piece of alder, maybe it's a piece of swamp ash, and every piece of wood sounds different. The grain has an effect, the way it's cut has an effect. So you can't just go out and spend $3,000 and replace the guitar that got stolen and get another one that's exactly like it. You may never find a guitar that you like as much. So the first one that was stolen from me was a Gretsch Duo Jet. I actually bought this guitar from Joe Walsh. I did not meet Joe Walsh, and the strange thing is that the guitar, before it ever ended up in Joe Walsh's hand, had belonged to, when I was 17, it was my girlfriend's brother-in-law had this guitar, a beautiful black, kind of a Les Paul shaped guitar. And I used to pick it up and play it when I was over at their house and stuff. And I never even thought about offering to buy it. I didn't even know if he wanted to sell it. And then I heard that it had gotten sold, and I heard that, that Joe Walsh had ended up buying it. And somehow, I don't remember how it happened, but I somehow was given the opportunity to buy it, and so I did. And I loved it. It was a beautiful guitar, and unfortunately, other people loved it too. And there was I lived in an old schoolhouse at the time. Now I'm 19, and it was an old 4-room brick schoolhouse built in 1890 something or other. And so I had a room to myself, a big room with a high ceiling. It was a great place to live. I was there for almost 2 years, I think. And I would have people over to jam. Well, there was this one guy, I didn't really know him. He was a friend of a friend, and he coveted that guitar like nobody else. He wanted it more than I did. And eventually he stole it from me. One day I came home, walked in the room, and it was gone. And I searched the building. I went downstairs into the basement, and I could see where there was a chair that had been put up against the wall, and there was a window that was either broken or open. I don't remember. And there was a tennis shoe print on this chair. And I remembered that the guy who loved that guitar always wore like Converse tennis shoes or whatever, and it would have had this certain sole print. And so I knew he stole it, but I didn't remember, who he knew that I knew. I didn't know his name or anything, and I never got it back. And it was devastating for me. I mean, it was my baby. It was my beautiful guitar. I would never have another one like that. Then the second one that got stolen was when I was playing in clubs in Denver. This would have been in the late 70s. I played at this one club. We would play there for a month at a time. That was how it worked in those days. You'd play a club for 3 weeks or a month, and you'd go to a different club, and you'd be in residence there for a while. And for whatever reason, the club owner at this place just couldn't stand me. He hated me, and I could feel it. And he made it pretty clear that he didn't like me. And one night, and I've never had a bad relationship with a club owner other than him, but one night I left the gig probably 2 in the morning, and I was outside standing by my car talking to some people. And I was standing on the passenger side of my car, and I forgot the guitar, got in my car, and drove halfway home. And I've always had a habit of reaching into the back seat and touching my guitar. That's where I never put it in the back hatch of my car, the back cargo area. I always put it in the back seat. And I, even if I know it's there, I reach back and I touch it, and it gives me, it's kind of a compulsive thing, I think. And it gives me, some satisfaction and that it's there. And so I reached back to touch it, and it was not there. And I looked back, and it wasn't there, and I did a U-ey, and I hightailed it back to the club. I looked in the parking lot because I remembered, I reasoned out what must have happened, and it was gone. Well, a year later, I got a call from the bartender at that club. His name was Bob. And Bob was a very nice guy. And he said, "Hey, Garth, you haven't been in the club for a while." And I said, "Yeah, I'll stop in sometime." He says, "Well, you ought to stop in tonight." And I began to get the feeling that he was trying to tell me something. And so I said, "Well, okay." So I showed up, and Bob gave me kind of a sly look. I don't think he winked at me, but it was pretty close to that. And there's this band playing. And actually, I forgot. Bob had told me that the band was there, that the guitar player had quite a collection of guitars. And so I was beginning to get, the idea. And so I introduced myself to the guitar player, and I said, "Oh, I hear you have quite a collection." He says, "Oh, yeah, there's this one I just got." And he shows me my Stratocaster. And so I said, "Well, I have to tell you something. This is my guitar. It was lost or stolen, basically, about a year ago." I go, "Where did you get it?" And he's playing at the same club I had played and lost it at. And he says, "Oh, I bought it up in Montana." And I said, "Really?" And so I ended up, I couldn't, it wasn't his fault. So I ended up buying it back from him. I think I paid $350, which was more than I paid for it originally, and I got it back. So that was one story. Then I moved to San Francisco in late '79, and probably 1984, maybe something like that. I had an Ibanez AS50, which was basically a 335 style guitar by Ibanez, a little bit smaller body than a 335, but basically a copy of it. And it wasn't the greatest guitar ever, but I liked it. And so one night I played a gig, and then I was going to visit my friend, my roommate, my housemate, because it was his birthday, and he was playing in downtown San Francisco. Well, so I covered up all my equipment with a blanket in the back of my Toyota Celica hatchback. And I went into the club, I visited my friend, came back out, drove home, opened the hatch, and the blanket was all nicely laid out, but there was no equipment. All my stuff was gone. And I remember the moment of confusion. It was like, wait a minute, did I already take it in? Or what? It took a few minutes for it to sink in that everything was gone. My guitar was gone. My Mesa Boogie amp was gone. My suitcase, I had an old leather suitcase that I kept my pedals, my tuner, and spare strings and tools and whatnot. That was gone. Well, a year later, a guy named Kirk Bryant, who was a bass player, happened into a club I was playing. I think it was Barney Steele's in Redwood City. He walked up to the stage and he says, "Garth, let me make your night." I said, "What?" He goes, "I found your gear." And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I walked into a club and there was a guy playing an Ibanez AS50, and he was playing through a boogie, and he says, I began to realize it was your equipment." And so he says, I walked up to him and I introduced myself, and I said, "I think this stuff belongs to my friend." He says, "Well, what's your friend's name?" He says, "Garth Weber." And the guy on stage goes, "Oh my God, that's the name that is written on the suitcase that came with this stuff." And so, being a more or less honest guy, he said, "Well, let's here's my contact information. Have Garth contact me." So I did, and he drove to Berkeley and showed up, and I looked in the back of his car. There's my stuff. And so I wanted to do something for him, because he'd been pretty honest with me. So I had another Mesa Boogie amp that I said I would sell him at a reduced price, and he ended up kind of trying to haggle with me about it. And I think in retrospect I should have just said, "Okay, I cut the price in half. I should have charged you $650 for this thing, and I charged you $350. I should have said, forget it. But I said, "Oh, well, how about $300? And so he bought the amp for $300. And so I had my gear back, which was really nice and so unlikely. I couldn't believe that happened twice. And then the last time it happened had to do with my father, who was a very intelligent but a very gullible man. and he was driving his, I think it was a Mercedes, in traffic downtown San Francisco, and he had a dent in it. And some guy, con man, set up, came up to him and said, "Hey, I can fix that dent for you, and for $50, $100, whatever." And my dad went, "Okay." So the guy came over to our house. I was at this point living with my dad, and he came over to the house, and he bondoed the dent and did a terrible job on fixing it. And while he was in our garage, he cased the place and he stole an ES-335 that I had only bought maybe a few weeks before that. Fortunately, it was not a great guitar, and I never even, I made a police report, but they can't really do anything. So anyway, that's the 4 guitars that got stolen from me. And so my message to people who would steal a guitar is you don't realize what you're doing. You don't realize the harm you're causing. It's not the money. You can replace the money. If you steal money from somebody, it's not personal. But you steal an instrument that somebody loves, it feels good in their hands, it sounds right to them, that they have some emotional attachment to, and that really hurts. So don't do it. Hope this video was enjoyable. Talk to you later.